The first sign of trouble did not come with a loud noise or a dramatic event. It came quietly, almost shyly, in the form of a strange signal picked up by one of the Outer Rim listening stations. The operator on duty thought the sound was just another glitch. Old machines in deep space often produced strange noises. Sometimes it was static, sometimes a broken transmission from a passing ship. But this one felt different. It had a rhythm, like someone, or something, was trying to speak. When the operator forwarded the recording to their central research unit, most experts dismissed it. They said it was probably an echo from a dying satellite or an old communication line bouncing back from a gas cloud. But one person insisted it needed a closer look. A quiet, observant fleet officer known for noticing details. Others missed. She spent hours replaying the signal. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It sounded like a trembling whisper hidden beneath layers of distortion. She removed one filter, then another, until the message slowly began to clear. What remained was short, trembling and frightening in its simplicity. "It's awake." She froze. She listened again. The same words repeated, the same fearful tone. But the message wasn't coming from any known outpost or familiar region. It was coming from an area of space everyone avoided, the veiled expanse. Many old maps left that region blank, preferring not to explain the strange readings recorded there in the past. People called it a dead zone, a quiet corner of the galaxy with no planets, no stars, and no reason for anyone to visit. And yet, a distress signal was coming from there. As soon as she shared her findings, the Galactic Council was notified. They held an emergency meeting, though none of them wanted to admit they were concerned. Some council members argued it was nothing more than leftover data from a lost probe. Others insisted it could be someone playing a prank using old transmitters. They all tried to sound calm, but the truth was clear. No old probe or prank would repeat the same message so many times with identical timing. Someone had sent that signal with purpose. The council members debated for hours. Some said they should ignore it. If a warning came from an empty region, maybe the messenger was already gone. Others claimed the signal must be investigated immediately, even if it meant risking ships and people. The longer they argued, the stronger the signal became. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and increasing, as if calling out more urgently each hour. Finally, they had no choice. The council ordered a joint expedition, something that had not been done in decades. Ships from different sectors were called in. Scientists, engineers, navigators, and specialists of every kind prepared to leave. They knew the mission was risky, but curiosity and responsibility pushed them forward. If someone out there needed help, they had to respond. And if something dangerous was moving through the galaxy, they needed to know before it reached anyone. The fleet officer who decoded the message was placed in charge of analyzing anything they found along the way. She didn't feel excited. She felt uneasy. The words, "It's awake," repeated in her mind, like a warning she couldn't ignore. She wondered who sent it. Were they still alive? What were they afraid of? And why did the message sound centuries old? Days passed as the massive expedition fleet prepared. Hundreds of ships lined the docks, carrying supplies, research equipment, medical units, and exploration drones. The mission felt historic, though no one knew what they were stepping into. Some crew members whispered about old legend stories of civilizations that vanished without explanation, star systems that dimmed overnight, and strange shadows seen drifting through empty space. Others brushed off the rumors, claiming such tales were only told to scare new recruits. When departure day arrived, the fleet spread its wings like a constellation of metal stars, moving slowly away from their home worlds. Everyone on board felt strangely aware of how quiet the launch was. There was no applause, no celebration. People whispered, walked slowly, and avoided eye contact. Even the air felt heavier. The journey to the veiled expanse took several days. At first, everything seemed normal. The stars outside the windows looked the same, bright and familiar. Crew members tried to stay busy checking systems, running scans, discussing theories. But the closer they approached the expanse, the quieter everyone became. The windows showed fewer stars now, as if the region ahead swallowed light. Strange readings started appearing on the ship's monitors. Some showed brief jumps in gravity levels. Others detected thin waves of unknown energy drifting across space like silent ocean tides. No one could explain them. The officer leading the signal research examined every detail she could find, but even she struggled to make sense of it. Then, for the first time since they left home, the distress signal changed. It didn't just repeat, "It's awake." Now it added a new whisper, soft but trembling. "Don't come." The fleet stopped. The message played again. "Don't come." The commanders held an urgent discussion. Turning back felt irresponsible. They still didn't know who sent the message or what danger they might be facing. But moving forward after hearing such a warning felt reckless. The officer listened to the message dozens of times. The tone didn't sound threatening. It sounded afraid. Whoever sent that signal wasn't trying to trick them. They were trying to protect anyone who heard it. After a long debate, the commanders agreed to move forward, but carefully. They formed a tight formation and reduced speed. Drones were sent ahead to scan for obstacles, though most returned with scrambled data or no data at all. Eventually, the fleet crossed an invisible boundary. The moment they entered the expanse, many felt the change. The lights on the ship flickered. The engines hummed louder. A low vibration moved through the floors, like distant footsteps beneath metal. Still, there was nothing visible outside, only empty space. But the officer noticed something the others missed. When she replayed the signal inside the expanse, it sounded different. Not clearer, but closer. As if the source was no longer far away. As if it was hearing them too. The fleet continued deeper until they finally detected the source of the distress signal. It came from inside a hollowed-out dwarf star, floating alone in the silence. The star looked cracked, as if something had carved tunnels through its surface. No natural event could cause such precise patterns. The officers stared in disbelief. Why would a distress signal come from inside a dying star? And who had the power to build anything inside something so massive? Before they could send probes inside, the distress signal suddenly stopped. The silence was louder than the message ever was. Everyone on board felt the same cold realization. They were not alone. Something had noticed them. The fleet officer looked at the cracked star and felt her heartbeat slow, as if her body already understood something her mind didn't want to accept. The signal wasn't a call for rescue. It was a warning. A warning to stay away. And now they had ignored it. Whatever sent that message had tried to protect the galaxy. And whatever they were protecting it from might not be asleep anymore. The fleet floated in silence near the cracked dwarf star. No one spoke much. Even the most confident officers felt a strange pressure in their chest, as if the whole region was watching them. The star looked lifeless from the outside, but something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just a dying ball of gas. It felt like a doorway to something older than the galaxy itself. The officer who had decoded the signal stood near the viewing window, trying to understand what she was seeing. The tunnels carved through the star's surface were too smooth, too deliberate, and too symmetrical. They looked like they had been shaped by something with purpose, not by natural forces. And the deeper she stared, the more she felt the same uneasy question return. What needed to hide inside a star? Before anyone could take the next step, the strange energy waves began again. They didn't shake the ships or break anything, but they made everyone feel a sudden chill. The engineers reported that navigation scanners were picking up short bursts of unknown particles. These particles didn't match anything recorded in the galaxy. They appeared and vanished in seconds, leaving only a faint glow behind. The fleet commanders gathered for a meeting. The officer with the signal data explained everything she knew, though she wished she understood more. She told them the warning message seemed to come from deep within the star, not from its surface. It wasn't directed outward like a distress call, but seemed trapped, as though whoever sent it had tried to push the message through layers of something heavy. Some commanders argued they should send a small team into the tunnels. Others believed the fleet should stay back until they had more information. But the longer they talked, the more the feeling of urgency grew. It was as though the expanse itself was pushing them forward, telling them they had arrived too late. Finally, they agreed to send remote drones first. The drones were small, equipped with cameras, sensors, and stabilizers to handle difficult terrain. They moved silently toward the cracked star and entered the largest tunnel, disappearing into the darkness. For minutes, all they saw on the screens were shadows. Then the drones reached a wide open space inside the star, an impossible sight. This chamber was massive, large enough to fit several ships inside. Its walls glowed softly, as if something had been scraping along them for centuries. In the center of the chamber lay a set of strange objects that looked like giant metallic rings stacked in a pattern that no one knew what they were. They didn't look like weapons or machines. They looked more like parts of something that once had meaning, something ancient and broken. As the drones scanned the rings, they picked up faint traces of the same particles the fleet had detected earlier. The officer leaned closer to the screen. She had a strange feeling, almost like she had seen this shape before, not in real life, but in the distorted images within the original distress signal. The rings had appeared briefly in one frame, just before the message whispered, "It's awake." But before she could analyze further, one of the drones malfunctioned. Its camera flickered, showing a flash of bright light, followed by a loud burst of static. Then the feed cut off completely. The others drifted backward automatically, their systems suddenly unstable. The fleet engineers tried to reconnect, but all signals from inside the star were blocked. Something inside was interfering with the equipment. That was when the flicker began. Not inside the drones, not on the screens, but in the space around the fleet. The darkness of the expanse seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The stars that were already faint began to dim even more, as though a curtain was slowly being pulled across the sky. The fleet's lights turned softer. The ship engines hummed unevenly, as if struggling to breathe. People on board felt the temperature shift slightly, even though the life support systems claimed everything was normal. The officer tried to stay calm, but the feeling of being watched had grown stronger. She wasn't the only one who noticed. Crew members whispered quietly, afraid to say anything too loudly. Even the command bridge felt unusually quiet. When they replayed the last seconds of the drone's feed frame by frame, they noticed something that made them pause. The bright flash wasn't random. It looked like a huge curved shadow moving behind one of the metallic rings. It wasn't the shape of a creature or machine, not clearly. It looked more like a presence, something massive, something that wasn't supposed to exist inside a star. Someone asked the question everyone was avoiding. Could that be what the message meant? No one answered. They didn't need to. The next moment, the star itself began to shift. A soft rumbling sound moved through the fleet, not through the air, but through the metal of their ships, like a deep vibration. The cracks on the star's surface widened just slightly, but enough for everyone to see a dot inside the cracks. Something glowed. Not fire, not heat, but something like slow-moving light. It twisted gently, almost calmly, like fog made of color. It wasn't bright enough to hurt the eyes, but it was unlike anything any scientist had ever recorded. The engineer teams quickly scanned the light. The readings didn't match energy, plasma, or any known matter. The data kept changing, refusing to settle into anything the machines could understand. Whatever it was waking up. The officer realized something important. The distress message had never been a request for help. It was trying to warn others not to get close, because something inside that star was better left alone. Someone long ago must have trapped it there. The rings inside the chamber were not random. They were probably part of whatever system kept this presence sealed. But the seal was breaking. The star shook again, this time a little stronger. Nothing exploded. Nothing dangerous happened. But the feeling of pressure increased, as if the entire region was holding its breath. One of the fleet scientists spoke carefully, trying not to alarm anyone. The star isn't behaving like a normal star. It's reacting to something inside. Another added, if that thing, whatever it is, was contained here, maybe with a reason it's stirring. Our arrival might have changed the balance. No one wanted to believe it, but the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. They had come to investigate a distress signal, but instead they had triggered something sleeping within the darkness. The officer replayed the final fragment of the message again. "It's awake," she whispered to herself. "We were never meant to hear this." The commanders finally gave the order to pull the fleet back to a safer distance. But before the ships could turn, a new signal burst through their channels. It wasn't like the first one. This was louder, faster, and far more chaotic. The screens flickered. A deep hum moved through the chi. Bridges. Everyone stopped moving for a moment. The signal wasn't a warning this time. It sounded like an alarm, not from the broken star, but from something uncomfortably close, something that had finally noticed the fleet, something that had finally opened its eyes. The alarm-like signal echoed through every ship in the fleet. It wasn't an attack. Nothing struck the metal. Nothing shook the cabins. But the sound itself carried a heavy weight, like a deep warning coming from something far older than their technology. Crew members paused whatever they were doing. Conversations fell silent. Even the engines seemed to hum more quietly, as if listening. The officer who had studied the original distress message stared at the new signal on her screen. It didn't match any communication pattern known in the galaxy. It was almost like a pulse, steady and rising, as though something was trying to make its presence known without using words. Slowly, the cracked dwarf star in front of them began to change. The soft light inside the broken tunnels brightened. The cracks widened just slightly, not enough to break the star apart, but enough to reveal that the glow inside was moving. It flowed like a slow river, curling around the tunnels as if stretching after a long sleep. The officer felt her heart beating faster. She wasn't scared in a panicked way. It was something deeper in instinct, telling her that whatever was inside, that star had not been touched by time the same way the rest of the galaxy was. It was beyond old, beyond anything she had studied. The fleet commanders ordered everyone to stay calm. The ships were told to form a wide circle at a safe distance. But as they moved, the strange presence inside the star seemed to respond. The soft glow inside the cracks pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat syncing with their engines. One of the scientists whispered to the others, "It knows we're here." The officer didn't disagree. She had felt it from the beginning, the sense of being watched. Now it was no longer a feeling. It was a certainty. As the fleet pulled back, the energy waves surrounding the star thickened. Instruments on every ship struggled to read the patterns. Some crew members said the lights flickered in the same rhythm as the star's glow. Others felt a strange pressure in their mind, like a whisper waiting to form words. The officer looked at the data again and again. Something about the new signal looked familiar. She compared it with the last moments of the ancient distress message. The shapes of the waves were not identical, but they seemed related. As if the ancient message was a warning, And this new one was a response to their arrival. She thought about the rings the drones had seen inside the star chamber. Those rings must have been part of the old civilization's attempt to contain the presence inside. Whoever built them had understood the danger. They had locked something away inside the star, hoping it would remain asleep, but the fleet, without knowing, had disturbed that sleep. Just when she prepared to run another scan, the calm silence in the fleet was broken by a sudden shift in the dark sky. The stars far behind the fleet flickered out for a moment, as if a huge shadow had passed in front of them. No structure appeared, no creature or object, just a sudden dimming of light across a massive area. People on multiple ships reported seeing it. A brief darkness moving across space, like a wave. No one knew what it meant. The officer checked her monitors, but they didn't show anything physical. Whatever caused the darkness didn't have a clear shape. It was like space itself had blinked. Then the star shook for the third time. This vibration was different. Softer, slower, almost like a deep sigh. Everyone braced for something explosive, but nothing exploded. Instead, a swirl of light gently rose from inside the star. It wasn't bright. It wasn't harmful. It was calm, almost peaceful, like the first light of dawn rising across a still ocean. The officers watched carefully, waiting for sensors to reveal danger. But instead of danger, the sensors reported something unexpected: communication, not through language, not through symbols, through emotion. At first, everyone dismissed it as a systems error. Machines couldn't read feelings. But the officer felt something deep in her chest. A quiet, almost lonely echo. A sense of searching. The presence inside the star wasn't trying to attack them. It was trying to understand them. For the first time, the officer felt a different kind of fear, not fear of danger, but fear of misunderstanding something so vast and ancient that their minds were not prepared for it. The fleet commanders tried to remain collected. They sent calm signals back, trying to show they meant no harm. Even though they knew whatever was inside the star didn't communicate the way they did, they hoped the intention would be felt. The swirling light inside the star slowed down. The cracks pulsed one last time. Then, as if making a decision, the glow retreated into the depths of the star's chamber. The officer watched the sensors. The presence wasn't gone. It had simply become still again, as if settling into a resting state. The alarm signals stopped. The strange energy waves faded. For a moment, the entire region of the expanse felt peaceful, quiet, almost like a sleeping giant had rolled over and drifted back into rest. The commanders looked at each other. Was it over? Had they avoided disaster by stepping back at the right moment? The officer wasn't sure. She replayed the data again. The presence had reacted to them, but not with anger. It felt more like curiosity mixed with confusion. It had been disturbed, yes, but it had also been alone for uncountable ages. The ancient civilization that locked it away must have known it wasn't evil in the way people understood evil. It was simply too powerful, too old, too uncontrollable. The officer finally understood the meaning behind the original message. It's awake. It wasn't a warning about something hungry or aggressive. It was a warning about something enormous and misunderstood. Something that should not be disturbed, not because it wished harm, but because its very existence was larger than what the galaxy could manage. The fleet commanders made the decision to withdraw completely. They marked the entire region as restricted. The star would remain untouched. No one would enter its tunnels again. The ships slowly turned away from the expanse, engines humming softly as they began the journey home. As they moved farther, the stars behind them brightened again. The darkness that had swept across space faded like a forgotten shadow. No one spoke loudly. There was no celebration, just quiet, thoughtful faces. Everyone had come expecting to solve a mystery or rescue someone in danger. Instead, they had awakened something that should have remained silent and had been lucky enough to leave without causing further disturbance. The officer stayed near the window for a long time, watching the veiled expanse grow smaller behind them. The cracked star looked peaceful from afar, like a glowing ember floating in the void. But she knew the truth. Inside that star rested something older than memory, something capable of turning the galaxy upside down just by waking up. It was quiet now. It was resting. Maybe it would remain that way for thousands of years, but the warning signal still echoed, gently through the fleet's records. A reminder of what they had learned. Some things in the universe should never be disturbed. Some messages are not meant to call for help. Some messages beg you to stay away. As the fleet continued home, the officer whispered softly to herself, almost like speaking to the stars themselves. We heard you, and we won't forget.